Thank you all panelists for joining us on behalf for joining us this morning, and on behalf of TIE Bangalore and IoT Forum Bangalore, I welcome you to this conference and this session this morning on global accelerators. I would also like to formally welcome on day 2. This is the first session on day 2. So all our participants, I hope you had a grand day and an exciting day and an insightful day. Day 1 yesterday from 4 p.m. So wherever you are in the world, we had an exciting set of sessions, keynotes, addresses. So I hope you're all set. If you're in India, you're all set with, or in this part of the world, you're all set with your morning breakfast and coffee. And if you are in the Western world and the US, you're probably just going to hear this and then get off to sleep. So you do have an exciting day today. It's a pleasure for me to introduce the moderator of today's panel, Kiran Rudrappa. Say hi, Kiran.
Hi, Anand.
Yeah. So Kiran is a serial entrepreneur. He's also IoT Forum's Edge and AI Task Force leader. We have about 10 task forces in the IoT Forum, a very mature set of individuals, very insightful, and we cover a lot of technology. So this is led by the AI and Edge Task Force is led by Kiran. To introduce Kiran and his very short introduction, he is the founder of I2G Global, a unique open business accelerator platform. Kiran has 32 years of experience in multiple startups and large companies like Schneider. He has built many high-tech platforms, products, solutions, and services, going from ideas to concepts and leading business development, marketing, fundraising, and M&As. It's a pleasure to welcome you as the moderator of this panel, and over to you now, Kiran, for the next hour and 15 minutes, 10:15 a.m. I'll be back just in case we need to keep a check on the time. So over to you, Kiran, and have a wonderful session.
Thank you very much, Anand. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for our audience joining from India, US, and any other part of the world. So welcome to IoT Matrix Connected, a track for the panel discussion today, Accelerators, putting startups on the fast track. It is always a challenge for entrepreneurs what, why, and how to pitch an idea to a startup accelerator. This panel discussion is going to look at it from various dimensions, and I'm sure each one of you who are looking for funding or guidance or both to build your startup would take home at least one action to work upon. IoT Matrix is on its sixth anniversary. Sixth anniversary is the annual conference of the IoT Forum. IoT Forum is a think tank initiative of TIE to rise IoT quotient of India. Started in 2014, IoT Forum is now a vibrant community of over 2,000 plus IoT startups, several thousands of active participants with about 14 task forces and 100 plus volunteers. IoT Forum initiatives include regular meetings, mentorship, an active community forum on various topics of interest, IoT Matrix awards to top startups, global ecosystem connects, corporate engagements, thought leadership on various topics, and maintaining the repository of about 2,000 plus Indian IoT startups. I urge all our audience to post on LinkedIn and tweet with at the IoT Matrix and IoT for India. Okay, so Anand, just to correct, I'm not the moderator for the session. Our moderator for the session is Priyanka Chopra, who is a Chief Operating Officer at SECO, IIM Ahmedabad. Priyanka and our distinguished panelists, I welcome you all once again. Priyanka, over to you to introduce our panelists and moderate the session.
Thank you, Kiran. Taking my cue from Kiran, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our audience, and a very warm welcome to all the panelists. I am Priyanka Chopra from CIECO. At CIECO, we work across the innovation continuum, from running incubator and accelerator programs to seed and venture funding and providing training and insights building for entrepreneurs. Basically, we work across sectors with early stage entrepreneurs to provide them with all the support they need to make a superlative impact. To give you some context for today's conversation, as we all know, India continues to be the world's third largest startup ecosystem behind US and China. We have over 9,000 startups and more than 300 incubator and accelerator programs to support early stage enterprises. As Kiran said, the focus of today's conversation is going to be on accelerator programs. We will try and understand the various different models of support, their value propositions, why should startups consider acceleration, how to evaluate these programs, and hopefully how to get the best out of these programs. We are very fortunate to be joined by a distinguished panel that represents the entire spectrum, from software-focused programs to hardware-focused programs, from corporate accelerators to independent accelerators, and from India-specific programs to global programs. This will undoubtedly bring forth a very rich discussion that we can all learn from. So let me get started by introducing the panelists. Can I request the panelists to please wave at the audience as I introduce you? First, we have Venkat Raju. Venkat is a serial entrepreneur, a seasoned corporate executive, and an active angel investor, advisor, and board member in startups. He also advises several accelerators spanning industries. Welcome, Venkat. It's great to have you. Next, we have Sangeeta Bavi. Sangeeta is the startup ecosystem lead in Microsoft startup ecosystem. She's passionate about empowering new age startups in India to help grow their businesses by bringing them the right products, solutions, and programs. Great to have you, Sangeeta. And you guys are all on mute. We also have Abhay Tandon. Abhay is the director and head of Lowe's Innovation Labs. He brings a diverse experience, having worked in startups, SMEs, MNCs across industries, verticals, and geographies. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Abhay. Next, we have Garrett Winter. Garrett is a partner at Hacks, the world's first and most active venture capital program for hardware. He works hands-on with early stage startups from all over the world to define their go-to-market product and investment strategies. Welcome, Garrett. Pleasure to have you on board. And finally, we have Pramod Gadge, the co-founder and CEO of Unbox Robotics, rounding off the panel and providing us with the crucial entrepreneur's perspective on accelerator programs. Pramod has built startups and worked with companies across the manufacturing, IoT, warehouse robotics, and 3D printing fields in multiple geographies. It is great to have you, Pramod. So the way we've structured today's conversation is that, the moderated part of the discussion will not last for more than 45, 50 minutes, maybe even stretching to 55 minutes. Then we will open the floor to questions from the audience, requesting the audience to please use the platform's Q&A or chat functionality to post their questions, comments, feedback, and we'll be happy to take those. So to get started with the conversation, Venkat, I'd love to start with you. While the focus of today's conversation is on accelerator programs, I wanted to request you to help our audience understand the difference between incubation and acceleration. They're often spoken about in the same breath, but they couldn't be more different. So as a serial entrepreneur and a veteran of the incubation and acceleration industries, can you help our audience understand which program is right at what particular stage or part of the startup's journey?
Thank you, Priyanka, and good morning, everyone. Yes, incubators and accelerators, they are different, but also kind of the same. And I'll borrow one of your phrases you just mentioned, the innovation continuum. So incubators and accelerators, I see them as part of the same continuum. And one extreme is our incubators, especially university, college established incubators where it is trying to encourage students and wannabe entrepreneurs to go and try out, test the waters to determine if they really want to become entrepreneurs or not. To slightly very early stage incubators where entrepreneurs with an idea or concept would require a lot of mentoring and other help to kind of nurture the idea, to take that idea and concept to potentially a product prototype or potentially help launch a small business, if you will. So overall, the time frame for an incubator is a little longer. The gestation, as you can imagine, takes a while. And typically, I've seen incubators range anywhere from 6 months to even up to 24 months, if you will. And then you have accelerators, and they come in different sizes and shapes depending on the stage of the company that they are catering to. And here we have accelerators that could help companies probably from the prototype stage all the way going to product market fit, or in terms of pre-revenue going to, let's say, $1 million ARR, to so-called accelerators. These are like, accelerators focused on, shall we say, post-Series A kind of startups and helping them with expansion across geographies and markets and so on. So they come in different sizes and shapes, and you as an entrepreneur or a wannabe entrepreneur should be clear as to whether you fit into an incubator or if into an accelerator, what stage. And again, here there are different types of accelerators, industry agnostic accelerators, very theme specific accelerators, like let's say hardware, and so on and so forth.
Sure. Thank you, Venkat. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sangeeta, if I may ask you my next question. So lately, we've seen corporates entering the acceleration space with a variety of different models. In fact, Microsoft was one of the first tech companies to venture into the corporate acceleration space. I think this was around 2010. I may be wrong. Given that working with startups isn't generally a part of a corporate's core business, why are corporates venturing into the acceleration space? And do you think there is a unique value add that corporate accelerators provide over independent accelerator programs?
Thanks, Priyanka, for that, and thanks for the opportunity to be on this panel. So what are startups essentially? Startups are nothing but they are sort of signal generators of the future, be it in terms of tech or business models, right? And I think a few years back there was this friction, if I may say, in terms of startups and corporates being sort of two different entities. What's happening right now is that be it the chief digital officer, chief innovation officer, the CTOs of these large sort of enterprises want to work with startups because it's also a learning opportunity for all these leaders, right? In terms of what's happening in their particular industry in terms of tech adoption. So it's a very symbiotic relationship, if I may say, in terms of creating these corporate startup programs and helping startups in that particular space nurture, adopt tech, grow, and so on and so forth. In terms of that's the benefit that corporates get, enterprises get by running these programs and nurturing startups. From a startup perspective, if you see, typically the corporate startup programs which are there, they mainly sort of cater to B2B startups. Let me take the example of Microsoft, right? We sell into enterprise space, into mid market. The kind of portfolio that Microsoft has, we pretty much cut across all the BDMs in these enterprises and across industries. So the startups basically are able to leverage the business, the market access that Microsoft brings to the table through the corporate program that we have. That's just from the business part of it. If you look at it from a tech perspective, most of the corporate programs, be it the cloud startup corporate programs like what Microsoft, AWS, GCP has, or if you look at some of the programs like, for example, Maruti Suzuki has launched a corporate program for startups focused on automobile or mobility. what that brings to the table, those corporate programs, how they help startups, is the deep industry domain experience which some of these corporates bring. Startups are able to leverage that and do a quick pilot, the whole MVP testing of whether it will work, not work. It's a very almost like a a fail fast, scale fast kind of a model that these corporate programs provide.
Sure. And have you ever run into any kind of issues around IP? Who owns the IP? I think that is one sort of recurring, worry that a lot of startups have when they engage with corporates.
Um, I think there is this sort of kind of hesitance or reluctance from startups, because ultimately you're sort of working with enterprises. But I think the corporate programs have evolved significantly over the last, in India, right, over the last decade or so. And now it is no longer about just using the IP for the internal use for that particular enterprise, right? These enterprises also help startups basically sell to other relevant customers and things like that. So that concern of IP is sort of no longer there or valid.
Okay, thanks, Sangeeta. So Abhay, you also come from the corporate acceleration space, and you have, in fact, deep experience in it because you've helped set up the corporate innovation programs at Target and Anheuser-Busch and Lowe's, and they're all very different from each other. Wanted to, request you to help us understand the different types of models and, what are the support infrastructure provided, and how should a startup evaluate a corporate accelerator?
Thank you so much, Priyanka, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to be here. And very, very happy to answer the question, right? So let me segue from where Venkat and Sangeeta left. Uh, there are multiple terms that we call our accelerators, incubators by, right? I mean, it could be an accelerator, it could be a accelerator, or I don't know, the unicorns and decacorns and cockroaches and everything. We come up with more and more terms in the ecosystem. So I'll take a dig at that, right? At the end of the day, one of the things that, we as corporates forget is the fact that, or sometimes we forget, right? And our business stakeholders, definitely internal business stakeholders, definitely forget that we are not doing a favor to the startups. Like Sangeeta mentioned, it's a symbiotic relationship, right? So when we say an accelerator, are we just talking about accelerating the growth of the startups, or are we also deriving benefits from there, or some kind of a ROI from there, which is also accelerating our growth in some form or the other as a corporate, right? So so these terms are, I would feel a little loose. And while we are slightly higher on the maturity curve today from an India standpoint, there's still a lot of ground to cover. So Sangeeta gave a perspective of one kind of a model, which, for example, someone like a Microsoft or someone like an Accenture, they take up that model, right? Where they're providing go-to-market, they're providing access to a lot more clients, they're providing access to a lot of technologies, right? But when you look at corporates such as Target, AB InBev and Lowe's, etc., as GCCs, our intent is to primarily work with them to figure out solutions, co-create unique value propositions that can help solve for the problems that we internally face, right? And what are these problems? These are problems which are basically nothing but how do we create a better, more feasible and salient environment for our customers and our associates, right? And to solve for that, for now as well as in the future, we start partnering with both internal players as well as external players. One set of those external players are the startups, right? And that is why it becomes very important for the corporate to choose the right startup and the startup to choose the right corporate partner as well, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a partnership. So some of the differences that I felt when I was creating Lowe's Innovation Labs in India about 14 months back when I started this journey is that there are a bunch of fallacies that I saw in the ecosystem today, and the model was evolving. So I picked on some of those, right? I felt that there are too many rigidities in terms of the stage of the startup that we'll work towards, in terms of the sector focus and so on and so forth. And I felt that there could be better outlining guardrails that governs the system, but we remove a lot of unnecessary rigid frameworks in the system that are applied today, right? So one of the things that we did was that we made sure that the program is sector agnostic and stage agnostic. Just to give you an example, Lowe's as a Fortune 50 company or rather Fortune 40 company globally works with very large enterprises for some strategic work. We work with very, very well-funded startup. For example, we work with a BrainCorp, Bostonova, Boston Dynamics, Magic Leap. These guys have raised a few $100 million or even $1 billion and plus, right? so we can work with them. At the same time, we work with a very, very young startup. The idea that, or I mean, the focus that we need to have is, can we create that unique value proposition through a solution that can be co-created with these partners, right? And when we do that, why do I restrict myself in working? If I can work with a brain corp in US, which is a robotics company, why can't I work with a gray orange in India who's probably raised a series D?
Right.
Or why can't I work with a 3-member, very, very young startup who has a very strong core capability set, and we can co-develop a very interesting solution with them? So that's why we focus on being stage agnostic. The second thing is sector agnostic. While we are a retailer, in fact, the second largest home improvement retailer globally, we felt that, we have always been ahead of the curve when we talk about disruptive innovation. And I'll give you one example. In 2014, we had consumer-facing robots in the stores. And in 2014, in the retail world, no one was thinking about consumer-facing robots, right? Very, very honestly, and especially not in US. So we had that. In 2015, we had an AR/VR application for our consumers. Again, this is the time where you had not even seen AR/VR segue into real estate, and we had applications in retail, right, as against a lot of our peers from a retail standpoint. So we have been ahead of that curve. And today, for example, if I look at a technology such as haptics is not applied in retail. If I choose to focus only on retail tech startups, I will never be able to find the most meaningful and disruptive technologies out there to apply to retail. So we say we are sector agnostic. Of course, the applications would be in retail, but we keep the floor open, we keep the dialogues open, right? So that, we can figure out an application with the right partner. Third thing that I would say is that, this has been a bigger evolution, which is on paid POC's journey, right? We felt that, I remember in 2017, I got a lot of flack internally at Target when I was pushing for paid POCs. I was told, and corporates have been bullish. I mean, we talk about investors being bullish, but corporates are bullish or have been bullish at least. Things have changed today. And I see Sangeeta smiling at this point, right? Because she understands that journey, that we as corporates have said that, startups are ready to work for free. We are doing them a favor, which is not the case, right? We need to have some skin in the game. And today, a lot of programs have started opening up a lot of paid POCs opportunities, right? So these paid POCs, again, if you look at it as a metric, people have started to standardize the cost. Now, in our case, because we are stage agnostic and we are looking at both incremental and disruptive innovation, one set of startups could be a plug and play solution, could bring in a plug and play solution, other could bring in a strong R&D flavor where we are co-developing a solution. In both the cases, the quantum of work is going to be very, very different. And the quantum of work is different, the commercials should be different too, right? So in some cases, we can pay a $10,000 check to a startup for working with us for, let's say, 3 to 4 months. In another case, we probably pay them $100,000, for the commercials of the POC, right? And the last part is, and that is where I think that a lot of corporates have in the past failed, is the corporate innovation entities are focused only on uh, executing the POCs or the pilots. Their KPIs revolve around that, right? And that is where the ball drops after the pilot or POC is successful and the business is not able to transition and make it meaningful, right? And that is where what we have also tried to do is, we have a prototyping team, we have a POC or piloting team, and then we also have a team for productionizing. So our job is to actually look at it, evaluate it, the technology, the product market fit, see if the integrations work out well, and then manage it end to end. And that is why, very recently in US, one of the startups that we have been working for a period of 2 years recently got a $10 million contract from us for a period of 2 years, right? The next 2 years. So we are not just looking at, testing out concepts in an agile way. We are also seeing if this is making sense. This can create actual value for the larger organization as well. And if so, can we partner for a fairly long period of time? Also providing them GTM and other things as well, right? So now startups, coming to the second point of your question, part of your question, which is how do startups evaluate the right program? It's so super critical for them to do that, because today, for example, if I get 1,000 odd applications every year, more than that, I see that 95% of those applications are not meaningful or associated with the actual thesis that you've put across. And that's primarily because today startups are, generally tending to, apply to a lot of different programs without seeing the actual thesis, without seeing whether it's making sense or not. And that becomes a problem, because if you're not sure what you're applying to, every accelerator will not give you the same set of benefits. So it's very important for the startup to look at what kind of stage, what kind of size, or what kind of value proposition is the corporate providing you as part of their program, and accordingly choose the right program, right? So that is the only request that I have for startups, that they should invest a little bit of time, because that will really help them strategically choose the right partner for their growth path as well. So that's going to be very, very critical for them.
Thank you, Abhay. I had a follow-on question. I understand from corporate like Lowe's perspective why a stage or a sector agnostic program makes sense, but when it comes to the acceleration industry, the conventional wisdom is that homogeneous cohorts, whether they are homogeneous by sector or by stage or by technology platform, those are the most effective, efficient to accelerate, because you can put together the entire support infrastructure, customize it to the needs of that cohort. If you work with such a diverse set of startups, how do you provide support, how do you customize support, and how do the startups derive value from what you bring?
See, unlike Microsoft or Accenture, where they're used to working with a larger set of startups, we work with, let's say, 8 to 10 startups a year. I would like to believe that, when we're talking about customizing, why can't we customize it to each and every need, right? For example, when we talk about conventional wisdom, we always talk about that one of the key metrics for a startup success is fundraising. And I disagree on that. It's sustainability of the startup which is important. That can be either looked at through fundraising that can help them sustain, or it can be in the number of clientele or the revenue generation based on which they can sustain themselves, right? So if we talk about that, like I have a startup in the cohort who's completely bootstrapped, who don't care about raising funds. I have another set of startups who have raised funds from global investors, including Lightspeed in US and so on and so forth, right? So it's we need to look at individual requirements. We have a very, very strong team of mentors who can provide individual mentoring access. We don't need to necessarily look at workshops, large workshops, right? Some of those things could be standardized problems. Some of them, for example, a serial entrepreneur doesn't need to be taught again about financials and legal, right? They already are used to that. They have done that for the last 10 years or so. They understand that. So I will not force feed them into getting into one of those sessions. What they need, for example, let's say we need a hyper reality expert, someone who can create digital clones, who can clone your facial expressions, who can clone your voice, and so on and so forth. We have someone who has multiple patents in that space within our team itself, and we're working with a startup called Rephrase. Now, why don't I bring in that person as a specific mentor to the startup and help them grow, help them validate their product, and so on and so forth? At the same time, if they're looking for investors, we have a lot of connect with the investors. We can provide them that. If they're looking for media coverage, we have a partnership with Your Story. We provide them media coverage through that, right? If, of course, the story is compelling enough, so on and so forth, right? So each of these startups have specific requirements. Instead of packaging them into a standardized fit, why can't I look at 8 to 10 different startups and provide them those specific, unique opportunities, right, or the benefits that they're looking for? So we look at it very, very independently, and that is why I think for us, when you try to homogenize it, it makes sense for a larger number of startups. But if you're working with 8 to 10 startups per year, it's okay to make it highly customized for each and every partner, right? And sometimes you would see overlaps as well, and that is where it becomes a little easier to tag 2 or 3 of them at one point of time and say that, listen, all 3 of you need a specific focus on this area. Let's create a mechanism to do that. Some of them are looking only for GTM, and some of them are looking at product market fit. Like if I work with a Series B startup, I don't think so. They're at that point of time they're looking at a product market fit, right? They're potentially looking at how do we get Lowe's as a client? How do we fast track that process, right? How do we open up more clients for them across North America? So each one of them have a unique problem statement, and we try to cater to that accordingly.
Makes sense. And you make a very good point. We also at CICO strongly believe that customers' dollars are the best way of funding there is. So, anyways. So Garrett, I wanted to move to you now. We'll shift gears from corporate accelerators, software-focused accelerators, and India-focused accelerators to independent global and hardware-focused programs. Hacks is considered as the Y Combinator for hardware startups. Wanted to understand how is accelerating hardware companies different from software companies, and what was the thought process behind the design of the program?
Yeah, I mean, I think this hits on a lot of the points everybody's been making too, of really honing in on as a startup, like what do you really need? What's going to help you in these moments, right? And I think the reason that we started Hacks was basically a very clear gap in this moment. Like there's all these amazing engineers, I'm sure plenty listening to us right now, that are building prototypes on their 3D printers, Arduinos, Raspberry Pis, kind of all these amazing tools in PhDs in labs, building all these amazing prototypes. but a very clear gap between when they have maybe a first prototype and actually getting that to a customer, getting that to a Lowe's or a Microsoft or whoever it is, where it's ready to scale and it's ready to go. And there's a funding gap there, and there's also an experience and network gap that exists. And I think the reason that we started Hacks was kind of starting to solve those problems. Like first, we'll help actually fund teams in these very early stages where they have maybe a prototype that's kind of like falling apart, but it's showing amazing technology. And then we don't just kind of write checks and kind of like, oh yeah, we'll work on your pitch deck and we'll get you access to networks and all that kind of stuff. Like those things are great, but we actually have a team of 30 engineers and designers that actually can bring their decades of expertise in really diverse fields. And I think getting to your point around how software and hardware differ is that the range of skill sets that are required for hardware are just a little bit more diverse. So you need to have not just the software engineer or back end or front end, you also need electrical, mechanical, industrial design, manufacturing, supply chain, and then all the business things, and then also all the software things that you would need in a normal software startup. So I think our goal is how do we augment teams in these moments of real need and help them get from that moment of first prototype to getting to something that they can bring to customers with talent, but also kind of resources and millions of dollars worth of testing equipment and testing chambers and robot testing labs and really kind of providing the infrastructure. And really those are kind of the things that we said, hey, this is a gap, right? This doesn't exist in the world.
Right.
And really kind of us bringing that thoughtful expertise. And I think that's really kind of the principle we brought around. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Pramod because he's had the opportunity to work with us as well. And I think where we see a lot of opportunity going forward, especially with not as many hardware investors out in the world, really kind of opportunity to kind of bridge that gap, but then also help teams and support them and invest kind of the millions of dollars that are needed to continue growing past that first stage as well.
Thank you, Garrett. And so you also represent independent accelerators on this panel. And what I heard, repeatedly, from our previous two panelists was the fact that corporate accelerators, the single biggest, support that they bring is access to their formidable networks, right? For critical access to piloting, that early stage enterprises need. As an independent accelerator that may not always have those kind of networks, is this something that, you're able to support, or, is the focus always on how can I help you make the best product?
So first and foremost, great products for the right customers is always, like you said, customer dollars are always the first thing. And that starts with great technology and great product. That being said, I would say a majority of my job is going out and talking to larger corporations, potential customers, and helping find and build those networks with our team. So I would say where the value of a corporate accelerator is that you have really deep networks within specific corporations and skill sets and networks, and being able to execute at billions of dollars worth of scale. Our goal is actually how do we broaden our network as well. So be able to get access to a certain amount of corporates that maybe it's hard to access globally, but also kind of be able to access hundreds, if not thousands of those through some of our networks. So that's a big part of our job as well. I know I downplay some of the value of networks or pitching, which is 100% super valuable. And that's really kind of half of our job as well, kind of making sure those things happen.
Thanks, Garrett. I think we should hear from Pramod now. You'll be able to validate or not a lot of these things. So Pramod, you've had a very interesting journey that began with Entrepreneur First, passed through Hacks, and then intersected with us at CICO, where you did both attended our programs as well as raise funding. So how did you choose these programs? What was the specific value add at different points of your journey? And if I may, what would you have not been able to achieve or perhaps take longer to achieve if not for these programs?
Thanks, Priyanka. Good to be here on this panel. And I guess I have worked with almost three partners.
Three of us.
Yeah. So for us, the journey was a bit unconventional. So we started when I didn't have a co-founder. So my journey began when I was searching for a co-founder, and that's where I went to EF. So the first step for me was to get a great co-founder who can align his vision to my vision and go for a longer run. And that's where EF journey happened to me. And at that point of time, I had multiple ideas. We were validating a few of those ideas, talking to people, industry experts. And this is where EF also helped me, or helped our team, to kind of put a structure to the madness. Like there were so many things going in our mind, uh, like right from my validating the idea, getting the customer LOIs, and getting into the right, I would say, business models. So this is where EF mentors or EIRs or EF team helped us there in validating those initial few things required to set a good foundation for the startup. So that was the value add from EF. And then once we got through the EF funding, then it was a time to build the product or build the prototype. And this is where the best hardware accelerator hacks came into picture. And we tried to minimize the risk of, I would say, the product development or initial product market fit through some trials in China. And so there were like a couple of things which happened through EF and hacks in the early 6 months of our journey. One is minimizing the risk of product market fit. And second is also accelerating the speed. Like considering we are building a hardware product, it takes longer time than a pure software play. Like they can build a MVP and then go into the market maybe in within 2 months or 3 months. In our case, it took us like 1.5 years just to refine what we are building. And this is where these accelerators having back couple of hundred or more startups across the globe, and they have all the insights, what works, what doesn't work. They have all the statistics. You just have to talk to them, get all the like all the guidance, and avoid some of the mistakes which otherwise you would have made, and we would have made those mistakes, and probably we wouldn't have reached this stage if we didn't have those accelerators to help us
Did we lose Pramod?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I think
Seems like
so.
it. Yes.
Give him a moment to come back.
Priyanka, I was just about to speak about
Yeah,
CII.
I'll Anand here. I'll check with the operator at the back end. Please continue.
Sure. Because he's in the middle of, his response, I thought maybe we should give him a few more seconds. Otherwise, we can continue.
Tulika, are you there? Can you check if Pramod's stream has been cut off, please?
We can continue. He'll be joining in a bit.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss, the business models and success metrics of accelerator programs next, but that will be, going off into new territory. I thought it was important for our audience to hear from Pramod on his experiences, personal experiences with startups, with accelerators.
If it's helpful, I can just tell maybe. Oh, Ramad's entering now. Perfect. I see him coming in, so I'll let him tell a story, and then we'll go from there.
Hello. I am sorry, like I think there was a network drop here.
No issues, Pramod. Just when you're beginning to talk about us.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So where was I? Like I was talking about minimizing the risk in the initial 6 months of our journey. So EF helped us with all the structure to the madness, like in the beginning, business model, customer validation, and getting the customer LOIs and all those things. And also giving the initial pre-seed funding. And of course, the most important thing, getting into the great team, like giving a platform to talk to other folks who are also looking at building a large startups, and finding a co-founder. That was the initial few important things which we got through EF. And after we initially validated the idea, we were just at an idea stage. We didn't even have a prototype. Because in our case, the prototype is actually multiple robots working together. So in 3 months, you can't build that. So we had to, of course, go for hacks, which is the best accelerator in the hardware space, I would say. to initially prototype and accelerate the product development, source from the initial vendors in China. And this is where we built our first prototype, did the initial POC trials with the customer there. And it helped us refine a lot of things in the beginning. We could show this concept to the customer. We got into the next steps with the kind of customers we are working with. So I would say there are a couple of things which happened in the initial journey with these two programs. One is minimizing the risk associated with what we were building. We could develop and show that we can build this, and we got the confidence from the customer. Second is we also got the initial seed funding required to build the kind of product we were building. And of course, I was also talking about the kind of insights these programs provide, because they have backed so many hundreds of startups in this similar domain, in hardware space or relevant domain. So we could also avoid certain things which
Right.
otherwise would have taken longer time. We built our initial, I would say, core product in like 18 months. It would have taken a longer time, I believe, if we didn't go for this program, and it would have taken a longer, I would say, larger funding as well, than what we have done in the whatever funding we have raised so far. And we also went through CIA, which is one of the best accelerators in the Indian market. So, but that journey also happened in an unconventional fashion. So we were the winners of IIGP, and this is how I got to interact with the CIA team, and this is where we got the mentorship and the initial funding support from CIA. So all these three partners kept coming together, really helped us accelerate our journey and minimize the risk associated with the kind of product we are building. So yeah, I think at each and every step we could look at different partners. So the first partner for us was EF, where, like when we were just a pre-idea or pre-team startup.
Thank you, Pramod. If I may ask, are there expectations that were not met?
As of now, no. It's like I would say it's up to the startup. Like how, they have the platter in front of them. It's up to the startup who they want to talk to. They can get on a call with all these partners from across the programs. It's up to them. I think they have a large ecosystem network available. So I don't think it's like for us. I think we have got whatever we wanted so far.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pramod, for that vote of confidence. So now shifting gears, partnerships work best when goals, objectives, and incentives overlap. And therefore, before entering into accelerator partnerships, apart from considering the stated explicit offerings of any program,
Hello?
aligned with where the startup wants to go.
Hello?
Yes, Venkat?
Hello?
Are you not able to hear me, Venkat?
Now I can. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, all right. No, so I was just talking about how important it is for startups to also be able to do a little bit of digging and try and understand the objectives, business models, and success metrics of this program, because that will help them better understand if the overarching objectives are aligned with where the startup will like to go.
Sure.
So Venkat, again, wanted to start with you. You advise a large variety of accelerator programs. And what are some of the typical, success metrics, business model that you've seen, and how should an entrepreneur factor those in, as is looking to evaluate a program?
Sure. So Pramod is actually a poster boy for how he chose Accelerator at what stage and for what purpose. And clearly he has benefited from that. And that's something for entrepreneurs to consider seriously. And Abhay touched on, go look at the thesis of the program and do the research before applying and make sure why you are applying to a certain program and what the expectations are. So let's touch on business models of different programs. And stepping back a little, it can be, pretty much independent accelerators, the prime driver from a business model perspective is the equity ownership of the portfolio, and that is their prime business model. Now, when it comes to corporate accelerators, they vary a little depending on whether it is a company like Microsoft versus Lowe's, and you already heard from Sangeeta and Abhay the slight nuance differences. So the way I see it is some of them are looking for co-innovation partners to accelerate their own internal corporate innovation, digital transformation, bringing in a culture of entrepreneurship and so on and so forth. That is another business model. Then there is evangelization. So there are certain accelerators I am familiar with. I'm not going to mention names here. Like they have come up with a platform. They want to make that adopted by the industry as a whole, and they encourage startups to come and build on this platform to promote progress, the adoption. There are accelerators and other programs that have a much bigger mandate saying, I am going to push for sustainability in India, for example, and encouraging green tech, mobility, EV, those kind of companies to come on board. So it is like part of a mandate, CSR, remit, evangelization. Then there are some accelerators that help with joint go-to-market. So this is also a win-win. It is not necessarily that the startups gain a large company to help with their own market outreach and network. Equally, the large corporates with their current product offerings benefit from these disruptive, interesting, sexy solutions, if I may, that the startups bring to fore, where those corporates benefit by augmenting their own product offerings with such solutions in their conversations with the CXO customers that they have. And purely if there are some programs that are very internal focused. So it is about time to market. Look, if I were to build it, it's going to take me 2 years. If I'm going to co-innovate and work with this startup, it's could shrink to 6 months, for example. And then there is like the revenue impact and the cost efficiencies. And there are accelerators that say, look, adoption of my cloud, for example, and it is going to have a bottom line impact or top line impact, cost efficiency. So there are like different expectations that a certain program has, and depending on who they are, you need to understand what their prime drivers are, and making sure if those expectations are in alignment with your own goals, if you will, and make sure you do that work. In terms of metrics, clearly, depending on the business model, each of the corporate program or the independent accelerator program will have differences in the KPIs, if you will. But in general, obviously, it's about bragging rights. Every accelerator, every program would want to claim successes. And okay, they were part of my alumni. And they went on to what were the follow-on rounds, what's the valuation, how big did they grow. So that is clearly interest. Depending on the type of business model that they are operating, clearly the internal goals are going to be, okay, revenue increase, top line growth, innovation, digital transformation, speeding up. How did we do? How is the portfolio value of my alumni? And so on and so forth. So it would vary by the accelerator type and the program expectations. One thing I want to make sure that entrepreneurs, when they're deciding all these things, is look for post demo day activities. So there are some programs that is like very, it's 6 months demo day, thank you, bye bye. And there are some other programs where they have a very strong alumni program and continued support through the life of the startup, if you will. And if you are a growing startup, you may want to think through how strong is their alumni network, for example. So overall, in terms of choosing the accelerator, look for what you are looking for, have clarity on what it is. If you're giving up some equity, it better be like the value that you're going to be getting is commensurate to the equity that you're going to giving up. And what are you seeking? Are you seeking domain expertise to accelerate your product? Are you looking for business expertise to kind of refine your business model? Are you looking for the investor connects that that particular entity has? So I know of some companies that go to YC, for example, with no other expectation but the strong investor network saying, this is the stamp of approval for me to raise the next round at the valuation I expect. Okay, so if that is indeed your only objective, so be it. But make sure you understand why you are joining a certain program, and that should help you. Some of the things you may want to watch out for. Look, there are most of them are good accelerators, but then there are not so good ones. So for example, if you end up in a program where it is nothing but a glorified free POC, free pilot for the benefit of that entity, think about that. Uh, how well connected, plugged in, if they're a corporate accelerator with their internal business unit, and do they really have influence or not? Check that out. And I would strongly encourage you to talk to alumni, the founders of startups, people like Pramod, for example, to better understand each program before you decide to join something. So let me pause here if there are any follow-on questions.
That's
Priyanka.
great advice, Venkat. So let me try and put Abhay on the spot here. Abhay, how do you measure success in ROI?
Well, I mean, firstly, Venkat, there was a very, very comprehensive coverage of, all the different models. So I was just thinking when he was speaking about it, some of those points totally overlapped. And I'm sure that he was covering that segment of, from a Lowe's Innovation Lab standpoint as well. It was very, very on point, right? Uh, I won't lie about this point when he mentioned the bragging rights. I was smiling at that because we all do that, right? These are part of the vanity metrics that we are all chasing. I mean, and if I can go on to the record and be candid about it, it it starts with the awards. The awards where you are talking about, how do you justify a corporate innovation entity wins a particular award, and you try to push out that our startups have raised so much of funding, and so on and so forth, right? So, anyways, coming back to the point, for us, the metrics are a function of the impact that we are creating in the lives of our customers, or the problems that we are solving for our customers today and in the future, as well as our associates, right? So, for example, like Venkat mentioned, right, you should probably look at the top line and bottom line impact, because that's a byproduct. If the customer's problems are solved for, they would shop more. If they shop more, you'll see a top line impact, right? If you are internally able to solve for the problems which had a lot of OPEX or CAPEX as well, that the bottom line impact would automatically be created, right? So we are looking. I mean, we don't just focus only on financials. Of course, there's CSAT, there's Net Promoter Score, and a bunch of other parameters that we look at from a ROI of this from a corporate standpoint, right? That and very importantly, are we able to start getting the organization to start to leapfrog and to create a vision for the next 5 to 10 years? That is super critical, right? Because when we talk about emerging technologies, which is our focus area, AI is, or at least ANI as we typically refer to, is not an emerging technology anymore, right? It's been there. It's a very commercial part of everything that we do today. But if you're able to, let's say, get it to AGI, or when I give you an example of tactile e-commerce, which is one of our themes, or next generation of homes, if you're able to get it to that. So by tactile e-commerce, I mean that, the e-commerce that we see today, it is not as tactile. It's visual, yes. Can you touch and feel something? Can you interact and engage a lot more? Can you smell? Can you taste? So on and so forth, right? So can we create a much better tactile e-commerce environment, which is the futuristic state of e-commerce? If we are able to get our business to be aligned on that, if we are able to get our business to that roadmap, then that is also a win for us, right? And from a startup's perspective, it's very, very clear for us that, there are a bunch of different benefits that they're all looking for. So our ROI or metrics that we measure from a startup perspective is sustainability. Sustainability could be that, we have helped them to raise funds. We have got them a full-fledged contract, which could be a multi-million-dollar contract. We have provided them access to a newer market, where we have introduced them to a lot of our peers or other retailers, right? So on and so forth, right? And we have been able to help them build a product market fit. So it's a combination of all these metrics that will help us understand if the startup is doing well today, and if so, have we been able to at least contribute a certain amount in that growth, in the growth path of the startup, right? Have we been able to create some strategic roadmap for them? So, for example, there was a conversation about build versus buy. I would say that today's build versus buy versus rent as well. You talk about licensing the IP as well, right? Or licensing the technology as well, right? So there are a lot of different ways, models, and mechanism in which we can make sure the startups are doing well. I love the point about the alumni program, because that's so critical today. Because you're not. I mean, I think we are away from the place where we would just provide standard credits or mentors. Everyone has mentors, everyone has credits, everyone has a physical space that they would also offer. But what else is differentiating for a startup to really, garner the growth path, right? So I think those are the key KPIs that we look at, and I think there's significant room to improve there. Like one of them is the alumni program. What exactly entails in the alumni program? How do you measure that? Because a lot of these things are done today at the superficial face value of it, right? Some programs are ahead of the curve and they are doing it a lot better. So I think we need to start quantifying a lot of these things, and that is how we'll be able to make a better ecosystem.
Sure, Abhay. Thank you so much. Sangeeta, I'd love to understand from you how to get most out of these programs. So, what would be your advice to startup founders, both from the perspective of picking a specific program, what kind of nuances to look for, and best practices for leveraging the full benefit of the program?
Sure. Thanks, Priyanka. But I would just like to add to what Venkat and Abhay said about the various KPIs and success metrics for a particular accelerator, right? Agree. Bragging rights. It's almost like a medal for any of the accelerator programs if a particular startup succeeds. But I think the most important thing is that when founders themselves go and talk and evangelize about a particular program, right? That's, I think, the measure of success. It's fairly qualitative, but the moment we see that network effect, because these entrepreneurs are, it's almost like in the startup world, there's 3 degrees of separation and not 6 degrees of separation, right? So when entrepreneurs basically go and recommend, that word of mouth referral, right, is the strongest, we feel, from our experience. In terms of my advice to founders is, uh, especially the startups that we engage with, right, when they see the benefits that are available, there are plenty. It's like, oh, you can avail tech, you can work with our research team, you can work with our engineering team, the go to market access, we can take you to global markets. There is just so many things which are sort of available. um, I think the clarity in terms of what the founder wants to do. If they have a very strong business model, but they need support on tech, they need to figure where they need support, what kind of support do they need, and then they need to evaluate the programs. Right? My advice to founders when they basically come onto our program is learn how to say no, because there are 10 things which are available. You need to figure what's going to work best for you, because the people on the other side don't know what really you want, how you want to drive your business, where you want to take this. At most, we can help you, we can support you, but it is your vision. So you need to bring in that clarity, and when that clarity comes, because it's not like our program basically has created successes only, right? There are a lot of things, which a lot of startups which have not been able to leverage the benefits of our program. And if we sort of analyze why it has happened, because the folks who have succeeded, they actually knew that, okay, I want to basically take my product in this market to this particular segment. Now Microsoft, tell me how you will sort of help me do it, right? So I think bringing in that clarity is of supreme importance. And then check with the other people, like what Venkat said, like check with your peer network in terms of what has worked for them, and then pick the right program.
Absolutely. No, you make a great point, Sangeeta. The startup is first and foremost the founder's baby, and therefore the vision needs to be the founders. We can only help refine, maybe augment it, but that's where our role ends. So, Pramod, would you like to add anything from your personal experiences to what Sangeeta was saying in terms of how can you derive the maximum benefit out of these programs?
Yeah, I think the important point for anybody to get into the program is to know what they want to do in the next 6 months, 12 months, define those milestones. Of course, long-term goals are there, but you break it down to what you want to do in the next 12 months. Like, do you want to do a pilot with a customer? Do you want to do a POC, or whatever do you want to raise funding for the next 18 months? So you can break down all these milestones into small steps, get the support from the program team, be it on the technical side, be it on the business side, and hit those metrics. You track your progress week on week, month on month. You have had a very good week on week tracker for us. So we used to track our progress on weekly basis. For a 3 months period, we used to track, like we tracked for 14 weeks. So you somehow quantify those milestones. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to show what progress you have actually done. So have those metrics defined and keep an eye how you are progressing towards that 12 months goal. I think that is very important. Otherwise, it just becomes like, okay, you got into a good program, but you didn't really have a major progress, or at least you couldn't track that progress. It becomes like a firefighting. Like, okay, or just on an ad hoc basis, you just do certain things. There is no structure around it.
Sure, no, that's great. And I see questions starting to come in. I'll just have a final question for Garrett. Given the time that we are living in, very curious to know, how did you adapt your support to startups in response to COVID-induced disruptions? And do you see the hardware acceleration model fundamentally changing in an increasingly fragmented post-COVID world?
So yeah, so I mean, we obviously are very hands-on when we work with teams. So Pramod and Shahid came to us in Shenzhen, worked with us in Shenzhen. That doesn't work in COVID during COVID times. So we quickly adapted. And I think if anything, the new behaviors that are emerging actually kind of start to show maybe a new type of engagement, but also the world that we also need to maintain when things get back to normal. So I think some of the things that we did very quickly were basically kind of creating a pipeline of parts and engineering and all this kind of great stuff that we have in our central locations or access in San Francisco and Shenzhen and kind of the different global locations we have, and having a way to have teams access those in all parts of the world, India, Australia, Singapore, Canada, wherever it might be, and being able to ship robots literally around the world to have teams be able to access them where they need to. And I think the other thing is that it really emphasized the global nature of how we work anyway. So we already had Zoom accounts and all those things. So we were able to kind of just emphasize the old behaviors that we had already built up. That being said, I think there's fundamental things that we're looking forward to getting back to, right? Like spending time together, right? Kind of having a lot of the community events and learning from each other and just sitting and having a coffee together and talking about our experiences. Just those things aren't happening quite as much as we want them to. So I think those are things that I think we've learned a lot of great new things. We've built an entirely new program to engage globally without kind of traveling. But we're also looking forward to having teams back together when the time comes, when we all can travel and can be together.
Thank you
Sorry,
so much.
Priyanka, you're muted. Yep.
Yeah. Like that. Thanks, everyone. I think we should now open the floor to questions. There's already quite a few that have come in. And the first question, and I think it's not directed to a specific panelist, so feel free, by Girish Pawar. The current crisis has forced the countries to focus on survival rather than on achieving sustainability goals. What should be the role of companies in driving sustainability and awareness, and also in recovery from the crisis?
I mean, I can jump in on this one just as, from our experiences. So I actually think a lot of the startups that we've been working with there's those first few months where we would say, like, what are we doing, right? This is like survival mode. Things are crazy. We don't know what's going on. Things are going in and out. But I actually found that the majority of our startups have the flexibility and an inherently entrepreneurial view of things that able to find entirely new seams in the market, right? Like actually all of this disruption and this change has actually opened up more opportunity rather than closed off opportunity. In my opinion, I think it changes things if you're a large corporate and you have existing cash flows and a lot of these things, but actually startups don't have that. You guys can pivot on a dime. You can move into these new opportunities. And we've actually seen the largest growth of our portfolio kind of in the last 12 months than we have kind of compared to our entire history, right? And that's all a result of startups actually being in some of the best positions to solve these problems that are now emerging, rather than waiting for somebody else to solve them. So that's I would encourage everybody who's in survival mode to like shift from like, how do I survive, to how do I go solve the new problem? How do I go meet the new challenges of the world we live in now? But maybe somebody else wants to take another stab at that one as well from maybe a more survival standpoint.
I think extended survival is nothing but sustainability, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, then what you're trying to do as survival is nothing but sustaining yourself, right? It's the sustenance that you're talking about. And I was having this conversation with Shraddha Sharma from Your Story, who's also an advisory member for our program, and she was very very interestingly, she brought in this point that we were talking about paid POCs earlier, and we were talking about influx of capital, right, into the organization. So I see two parameters. One is that these paid POCs also help in survival, right? At this point of time, there are certain jobs which are preserved because of the paid POCs, and again, some private entities invest as well. So there's that influx of capital, essential capital, that is very very needed. Second thing is, at this point of time, it's also important that startups, like you mentioned, Garrett, right? And in fact, Garrett, William is also in our advisory panel, so we have that connect with SOSV as well. So startups tend to be agile, right? And there's a constant need from large organizations to digitally transform very, very quickly. For example, if I look at retailers' perspective, and specifically in essential retailers, the growth has been tremendous. To meet those growth paths for even large retailers, they have tried to work on their supply chain very, very effectively. They have tried to work on the e-com platforms. And for that, they have needed immediate help. You can't wait to build products immediately, right? Sometimes you need that help, and you partner with startups, and that is where the startups who have shown that flexibility to start looking at consumer needs or customer needs or client needs, they have been getting a lot of influx of money from that channel as well, right? So to your point, Garrett, I totally agree that it's a combination of that, how we can all contribute towards an influx of capital, and how flexible is a startup at this point of time to receive that capital. So if we are able to do this a little in a streamlined way, then I think not only are we talking about survival over here, we are talking about building and coming out much stronger after this pandemic.
Yeah, I would like to add, see, when it was Q2 this year, it was a doom and gloom, and one major industry group came out and produced a report that said 40 to 50% of startups would fail. And now it is December, and clearly we know the startup ecosystem has been a lot more resilient. And I would add, Submit, in fact, a lot of startups have come out stronger, if you will. But clearly, there have been certain startups in certain sectors that have been impacted. But I must say, there have been corporates individually and as a collective group. For example, CIIE, for example, launched a special fund and providing not only the money, but also the expertise and other things that Abhay touched on in terms of providing paid POCs, pilot, etc., to sustain this company. So overall, at least I can say that the industry has come together with corporates playing a role in terms of sustaining and enhancing the resiliency of the ecosystem. So I personally am very bullish about looking at 2021 and forward.
Thank you, Venkat. Thank you to all our panelists. The other question I have is from Veer Kamesh for Pramod. Pramod, what was the basis to go for seed funding, and how did you decide the quantum of investment?
I think it was simple. Like in the beginning, you want to build the product, you get it tested through the customers. So you want to build a team like to do that. So you basically look at the funding from the next 18 months of milestone, how much money you want to you want to hit those milestones and get to the next stage of your startup. And all these requirements basically result into some kind of a funding requirement, and this is what we also did during our journey.
Okay, thanks, Pramod. I don't see any other questions. Do we have any other questions? Okay, doesn't look like it. So then let's wrap up. And sticking with us through some of the tech up and downs. Unfortunately, that is the nature of the world we live in today. We heard a lot of nuggets, and while I'm tempted to rattle off a long list of insights, the top three that stood out to me were: number one, for startups to really zone in on what they need, visit domain expertise, business expertise, or investor connects before choosing a program. Then please look at the mandate, the thesis, the stage, size, value proposition that the startup program is advertising. And finally, don't just look at in-program support, but also look at post-program support. Is the program really going to be engaged with you, post the program as well. What is the strength of the alumni networks? And always remember the startup is your baby and you are in the driver's seat. So thank you so much, everyone. And I really enjoyed myself. Although I've been in this sector for the past 6 years, I'm taking away insights as well. So over to you, Kiran.
Okay, thanks, Priyanka. Just awesome session. Very, very valuable inputs. And I'm sure each of the entrepreneurs would really take one action to work upon when they go back from this session. So a quick summary is you as an entrepreneur need to articulate your needs and wants in your journey. Like you want to get idea validation, domain support, business models, go to market, seed fund, you want co-founder, talent, growth, investor network, and then looking at an incubators or accelerator. And as Venki said, looking at post demo day, talk to the alumni network. And as Abhay said, build versus buy versus rent models. And Sangeeta said, as a success factor in entrepreneurs talking of the program. And as Pramod said, weekly tracking of your progress, solving the new problems. And overall, very promising year 2021. So thank you very much, Venkat. Thanks, Abhay, Sangeeta, Pramod. And once again, thanks, Priyanka, for extraordinary moderating the session.
My pleasure, Kiran. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.